A very warm welcome to the curtain raiser for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit. The curtain raiser is being held ahead of World Environment Day 2022. The World Sustainable Development Summit is the annual flagship event of the Energy and Resources Institute, which has now completed more than 2 decades of making sustainable development a globally shared goal. Today, we will formally announce the dates and theme of the next edition of WSDS. Given the significance of the World Environment Day in raising awareness about environmental issues and sustainable development, we will hear from TERI researchers on crucial changes that will positively impact the environment through the release of video series, Green Shoots. And finally, there will be an MOU signing between TERI and Diamond Books to create greater awareness on water conservation. Without further ado, I now invite Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'll welcome you all to the curtain raiser for the 22nd edition of World Sustainable Development Summit, which is TERI's flagship event. At the outset, I want to thank the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change for extending their support to TERI and WSDS in the past and this year as well. I would like to express our gratitude for their logo support as well. We understand that the Honorable Minister and other senior officials are abroad and thus are not able to attend today's event, but we thank them for their support and encouragement. I'm extremely thankful to our chairman, Shri Nitin Desai, for his mentoring, encouragement to all TERI colleagues, not just for this event, but always. Thank you so much, sir. We are grateful to Mr. Ovis Sarma, Deputy Executive Secretary, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Dr. S. Siddharth, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Bihar, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Senior Advisor in DST, Mr. Sunil Nair, Chief General Manager, Reserve Bank of India, and all the participants to have taken out time to attend this important event. WSDS was instituted way back in 2001 by our former Director General, Dr. R.K. Pachauri, and the summit series has thus a legacy of over 2 decades. It is basically for making sustainable development a globally shared goal. The only independently convened international summit on sustainable development and environment based in the Global South, the summit platform has brought together thought leaders, heads of states, scholars, corporates, youth groups, civil society representatives from all over the world. The 2022 summit also witnessed launch of a major initiative, Act for Earth, and I'm sure in years to come, it will become one of the most engaging platforms where people will throw new ideas and also look for solutions. I'm happy that this event will witness the launch of the summit overview document. The umbrella theme finalized for the next edition of WSDS focuses on mainstreaming sustainable development and climate resilience for collective action, which is also the topic of discussion today. Some of the important thematic areas where integrating sustainable development becomes important includes climate policy, finance, science, technology, and innovation. For this action at all levels are important. It is multilateralism, national measures, subnational measures, and community actions. They all become extremely important. And you can't say which is more important than the other. And it is also that the role of various stakeholders, including civil society, businesses, research and academia, they all have to contribute if we have to succeed. Perspectives from a variety of lens and institutional vintage becomes important when we talk about mainstreaming sustainable development. For example, from a multilateral perspective, the role of United Nations and other intergovernmental bodies, including developmental banks, is crucial. From a public finance angle, perspectives and measures from finance department, ministries becomes extremely important. And from innovation and R&D perspective, the role of science and technology ministry becomes equally important, and so are the corporates, because if they are moving towards net zero, they also have to invest in R&D. And from a finance regulatory angle, perspectives and measures from Reserve Bank of India becomes important. It is increasingly becoming clear that our political, environmental, and commercial activities are still being carried out in silos. The mechanisms and tools within various sectors of economy, whether it is government or the private sector, are often carried out in silos, and thus we miss on the opportunity to collectively act towards sustainable development. Because ultimately we need a holistic approach. It's not that it's the impact of one technology has on the other technology, and even on technology development, because you have to have a complete wheel rather working on different spokes of the wheel. By mainstreaming environment into decision making, there is higher possibility for policymakers from various issue areas to provide more holistic responses and design joint interventions in sustainable development. Because even if you look at R&D, it cannot be in isolation from the education system, because you also need trained manpower to contribute to a particular area of research. It is also somewhere that we have to realize that greener is not always expensive, and it is the impact of the environment on various actions that must be taken into account. And thus, integrating environment into decision making will contribute to improving the way government allocates funds and also work on strengthening interdevelopmental planning process, which will enable them to effectively respond to the environment issues in short, medium, and long term. It is important to use creative means to spread environment awareness among all citizens of this planet. To this end, at this event, TERI will be signing an MOU with Diamond Books. Some of you might be aware that they bring out interesting books for young children. And I personally feel it is important to motivate, encourage, and bring awareness among young children, because ultimately they can even put pressures on their parents, and they also must realize how important it is to conserve energy. So we are looking at developing comics on the subject of water, and I'm looking towards like how to spread this interesting message on environment through characters like Rocket, Chacha Chaudhary, Pinky, Billu, Sabu, and so on. So we are looking towards that. We will also be screening the first film of the series, Green Shoots. The video will feature TERI researchers who will share what they believe are incisive changes that can positively impact the environment and are on the planet. With this, I again welcome you all to what promises to be a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhawan. It is my honor to invite Mr. Nitin Desai, Chairman, Governing Council TERI, to deliver the opening address.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here at this event, which is a curtain raiser event for the World Summit on Sustainable Development. Let me first welcome the very eminent speakers who will be speaking to us later, Mr. Oves Sarmad, Mr. Siddharth, Mr. Akhilesh Gupta, and Mr. Sunil Nair. The proposed World Sustainable Development Summit, more will be said a little later by the organizers of the summit. The focus is going to be on integration of environment and development within the framework of sustainable development. And in many ways, the idea of sustainable development developed as a way of finding communication between environmentalists and people whose primary focus was on development, growth, poverty eradication, etc. When I joined the Brundtland Commission in 1985, and they recruited me basically for the writing of the report, and I wrote that first text on the sustainable development, the intention was to find common ground between people who otherwise were at odds. The environmentalists thought that the greatest challenge to environment was development and growth and so on. The people who were concerned about poverty eradication and development and growth thought that environmental protection was the barrier that was preventing development from taking place. The idea of sustainable development was to connect that. It has gone beyond just something which is a language which these people can share and talk about when they talk about issues. It has gone into something which has become much more central. I would argue today that it is very difficult to talk meaningfully about development unless you also address related environmental concerns, concerns about resources, concerns about environmental impact, and so on. Equally, we cannot talk of environmental protection if we do not at the same time see how we can do that without endangering people's livelihoods. You can't, because if you endanger people's livelihoods, you will not succeed. As we have found in India when we talked of the protected areas and so on, and everywhere in the protected areas, we have found that we have had to address the challenge of meeting the needs of the people who live in and around these forests in order to protect the forest itself. So I'd say that today, sustainable development has gone beyond language into something which requires much closer integration. Now, this is already happening in certain sectors like energy. Today, nobody talks about energy investment without looking at that dimension of environmental impact, particularly climate change impact. It's no accident that today you cannot raise any money for a coal plant because there is a fear that this coal plant will become obsolete as action on climate strengthens and increases. But there are other areas also where this integration is required. Now, the whole point of what we'll be doing in the Sustainable Development Summit is to find what are the challenges, the key challenges of integration that we face. See, today we are at the 50th anniversary, literally, of the Stockholm Environment Conference. And in fact, there's a UN meeting going on right now in Stockholm on this issue. Now, Stockholm did a very valuable piece of work in bringing environment into policymaking. And it was after Stockholm that people set up environment ministries, environmental control organizations, water and air pollution boards, and things like that. That was a very valuable exercise. But was already there, even though the conference was an environment, some reference to sustainability came in. Stockholm was a conference where only one head of state from outside the host country attended the meeting. And that head of state happened to be Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India. And she made that famous speech about poverty and environment. Now, that was in some ways an argument based on sustainability. That you cannot talk of environment unless you also recognize the link with poverty. And that was today, we have recognized this. We recognize that you cannot address particularly rural environment issues unless you keep in mind the need for people's livelihood. And equally, you cannot protect people's livelihoods unless you protect the water and the land on which the livelihood depends. So in many ways, he had already anticipated the thing, which really came up in a big way, first in the Brundtland Commission as a political level. It was, of course, there in academic discussions, and later in the Rio conference, where I was the Deputy Secretary General. And it did come up there, and that was a conference which really integrated sustainability, environment and development in Agenda 21, and it is recognized as perhaps the beginnings of that. Let me not go too further into how this has developed, but let us ask ourselves, where are we now? How much have we achieved 50 years after Stockholm, 30 years after Rio? Where are we? I would say one thing which we have achieved is awareness. That when we did the Rio conference, I had great difficulty in mobilizing corporate leaders. Our group of corporate leaders were about 20, 25 of them participated and acted in the Rio conference. 10 years later, when we had Johannesburg, we had so many who wanted to participate that we had to have a separate meeting to organize their contribution, the partnerships they offered. And today, I would argue that a very large proportion of particularly global corporations are fully committed to the idea of sustainability in their actions and activities. This is one dimension, but beyond that dimension of corporate awareness, I believe there's also been a dimension of awareness amongst, I would argue, the committed, educated, and knowledgeable non-governmental organizations. The one thing I've seen over these years, over the 30 years, is the spread of global networks of people being brought together on an issue. And look at the sheer number of global non-governmental organizations dealing with climate, for instance. Now, I'm stressing this because in many ways, this is what we are trying to do in the World Summit on Sustainable Development, which we organize. What we try and do there is to bring together people who are not just decision makers in government, but who are also people who are involved in research, people who are involved in activism at the ground level, youth groups, and so on. It already started in Rio. When we brought in local authorities, trade unions, corporations, women's groups, and so on into the whole process of discussion and dialogue. That's a second advantage that I have seen that has emerged. Third advantage is, I think, the market is responding at least to some dimensions of sustainability. I gave the example of renewable energy now displacing fossil fuel-based energy in the calculations of people who are making market-based investments and so on. And so this is the third thing. Where I think we have not succeeded is in the institutional changes required at the national, local, and even global level for horizontal integration. And this is one of the challenges which I hope we will address when we have the World Sustainable Development Summit. And the second challenge that I think we need to address is that sustainability requires equity between this generation and future generations. And the future generations do not have a voice in our current politics or in our current economic decision making. How should we do that? I was very happy that one of the major contributions to the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting is a youth report, which has been written by 1,000 youngsters from 90 countries. How do we do more of that? How do we integrate them more to the decision-making process? Because today our problem is that the decision-making is in the hands of the people who are causing the problem, not the people who are affected by the problem. It's like you have a car accident and you say it is a responsibility, it is a right of the person who caused the accident to decide when to call an ambulance, when to call the police. Now, that's really obviously not a very sensible way of going about things. But we do not have anything at the global level comparable to the ideas of social democracy, of liability in law for the damage that you cause to others. So I'd say that there are institutional barriers, ethical barriers still in getting solutions which address the challenges of equity, particularly between now and future generations, which have to be addressed as part of sustainability. So my hope is that the World Sustainable Development Summit will address some of these issues and give us some possible answers to these. So with this, I welcome all our speakers and look forward to what they have to tell us on these themes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now invite Dr. Shelley Kedia to launch a summary overview document for WSDS 2022 and to formally announce the dates and theme of WSDS 2023.
Thank you so much, Anuradha. Dignitaries and dear friends, greetings to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us at the virtual curtain raiser of the World Sustainable Development Summit. On behalf of Team WSDS, I'm happy to welcome you to the curtain raiser of the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, an initiative which has been striving to drive ambition and action on sustainable development for over 2 decades. I'll just be projecting my screen. I hope the presentation is visible. Anuradha, can you confirm?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. The summit was instituted in 2001 as Delhi Sustainable Development Summit, and the World Sustainable Development Summit is the only independently convened platform on the topic of sustainable development and climate action based in the Global South. The summit is designed as a platform to pioneer conversations that drive global ambition and actions at all levels, both horizontal and vertical. The summit is designed as a platform to exchange knowledge, ideas, and best practices, and also contribute towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the goals of the Paris Agreement by encouraging both informed as well as collectively driven actions. So what is the theory of change? Our theory of change is enshrined in the theory of constructivism, according to which actors construct knowledge rather than passively taking in information. Constructivism involves the process of evolution of norms through socialization and stakeholder interactions. When stakeholders and world leaders across the board reflect on their experiences, they build on their own representations and incorporate new information into their pre-existing knowledge. By playing a constructivist role through research and dialogue, the initiative will seek to reinforce and strengthen commitments at all levels to enhance ambition and action through the World Sustainable Development Summit to create a more sustainable and equitable world for present as well as future generation. Coming to the summit series, in terms of cumulative statistics, over the past 21 years, the summit has seen the participation of heads of state and governments for 54 times, specifically in the inaugural sessions, and of minister 103 times. Of that, 25 ministers, both present and former, participated in the last WSDS. The summit has also seen participation of Nobel laureates, business leaders, and more than 38,000 delegates from across the world. Coming to the statistics of the last World Sustainable Development Summit, and this is a quick report card. The last edition of the summit was held from 16th to 18th of February 2022 under the umbrella theme of Towards Planetary Resilience, Ensuring a Sustainable and Equitable Future. The virtual summit saw 12,000 plus registered delegates from across 143 countries. The program included 45 sessions, 10 expos. The number of speakers was 327, which included 25 ministers. This is testimony to the fact that the summit has continued to mobilize interest at the highest political levels from across the world. Apart from participation, the summit also focused on outreach through media, social media, website, and mass mailers. Coming to the highlights of the last summit, the summit was inaugurated by Shri Narendra Modi, Honorable Prime Minister of India. The summit included 3 ministerial sessions, a media colloquium, a high-level session on COP27, Green Olympiad Youth Prizes, CEO Forum, a youth plenary, and a women leadership plenary. Various types of addresses at the summit included ministerial addresses, leadership addresses, and science leadership address. The summit aimed at generating larger political will while ensuring the discussions were rooted in science and knowledge. And now is the time to unveil the theme, dates, and venue of the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit. The next edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit will be held from 22nd to 24th of February 2023, which is from Wednesday to Friday. The umbrella theme of the next summit is Mainstreaming Sustainable Development and Climate Resilience for Collective Action. The event will be an in-person event and will be held in Delhi. While we are deciding on the venue, but in most likelihood, the venue will be the India Habitat Center based in New Delhi. A little more about the theme. As pointed out by Mr. Nitin Desai, as well as Dr. Dhawan, many achievements have been made since Stockholm 50 years ago, and as we speak, a major gathering is ongoing. But considering the enormity of the challenge, much more needs to be done in terms of collective action, as well as institutional strengthening, both horizontal and vertical, to advance sustainable development and address the challenge of climate change. Towards this end, the theme of next year's summit will focus on mainstreaming sustainable development and climate action across the board. We are absolutely delighted that today we have a diverse range of speakers at the curtain raiser from the fields of multilateralism, public finance, science, technology and innovation, as well as finance regulation. Governance gains of mainstreaming sustainable development, including better cross-sectoral working and holistic response. The impact of mainstreaming has a potential to increase awareness, change perception, attitudes, and improve the way intersectoral decisions are made. Integrating environment into policy and praxis will contribute to improving the way governments allocate resources, and it will further strengthen interdepartmental planning processes, which will enable them to effectively respond to environmental issues in the short, medium, and long term. One example of this is the practice of green budgeting, which has been implemented by the state of Bihar, and we are very privileged to have Dr. Siddharth who will be talking about it. In terms of next steps, what the team WSDS will do after this curtain raiser event is to continue to seek partnerships and mobilize partnership for the summit, and also work on the curation of the next year's summit. We do hope to have more ministerial sessions, and this time, apart from a ministerial session on environment, we do hope to have a ministerial session on finance as well as science, technology, innovation, so that we can talk a little more about horizontal integration of sustainable development. This apart, a major initiative titled Act for Earth, which was launched at WSDS, the activities for this will be ongoing under two components, namely SDG Charter and COP27 Compass. And now is the time for the launch of the WSDS 2022 Summit Overview document. The document is available on public domain through WSDS website, and I'll be pleased to project it very quickly for all of you. So this is the Summit Overview document, which will give an overview on the discussions that took place in the summit, according to the plenary sessions as well as the thematic tracks. This brings us to the last segment of the presentation, and I would like to thank you all for being such a patient audience. And now I would like to hand over the screen to my colleague, Ms. Anuradha Mathur. Over to you, Anuradha.
Thank you, Shahi. I now invite Mr. Wsds Verma, Deputy Executive Secretary, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, namaste to the audience, and especially to Dr. Dhawan, Dr. Nitin Desai. Sir, it is a great pleasure to see you and to listen to you, and Dr. Dhawan also. And from UNFCCC Climate Change Secretariat, I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary. It's a great pleasure, true honor to be part of this curtain raiser event for the World Sustainable Development Summit. And at the outset, I'd like to say that you can count on our full support. We'd like to make the summit as part of UNFCCC events that happen throughout the year, linking to the COPs and the decisions that the world takes on climate change policies and climate action. So really very, very pleased to be here at this important event, which is closely linked, the Wsds Summit, which raises important awareness on the current global environment issues. At the outset, I'd like to quickly reflect on some of the points that Mr. Nitin Desai had very eloquently and very, in a very relevant way highlighted. That is the important link between human development and our existence, with all the policies and all what we talk about addressing climate change, environment, protecting environment, biodiversity and soil and so on. We have to keep the perspective of human development and the individual right at the center of all of that. And unfortunately, sometimes the policies, the discussions, the fora often fail to do that. And I think the World Summits is a very important opportunity to do that. And TERI is the forefront organization, which brings about that direct linkage from policy to action. And as Dr. Desai also said, the horizontal integration is extremely important. And I'll touch upon a few of the other things that he talked about, especially with regard to the intergenerational context of the decision making that we are all involved in. But again, it's a great pleasure to address your audience today and to provide our perspective from UN Climate Change Secretariat and the process. And as it happens, in fact, I'm in Stockholm today, arrived here last night, and will be at a panel discussion with our two sister convention agencies, biodiversity and desertification, in few hours to highlight the importance of collaboration and working together between the three conventions. So, and then today and this week is marks to be quite relevant, important for also the curtain raiser of your event, the Stockholm 50, as you already mentioned. And then we have a kickoff of our subsidiary body meetings in Bonn. First time after the pandemic. This is the 56th session of the subsidiary bodies, and we're expecting or already have more than 5,000 participants who are there in Bonn, preparing for the COP27 later this year. So the negotiations are very much underway. So let me give you some perspective of where do we stand now and what is the current sort of big picture that we are looking at. 2022 is the year when we must emerge from the global pandemic and achieve a pivotal transformational change in global climate action and policy. And this year is also the year which marks the 50 years since the adoption of the Stockholm Declaration on Human Environment in 1972, and interestingly, 30 years of the Rio Conventions, which includes us, UNFCCC. So in the 3 decades that passed since Rio, one thing remained unchanged: the need and urgency to tackle the environmental issues in a holistic manner and an equitable manner, as also Dr. Desai mentioned. Nations knew this since the first day that progress in one Rio Convention will definitely entail the other two. And that's why I mentioned that the event today is to make sure that we all work in a coordinated manner. So what did change over the last 30 years is, this is the most important thing, the scientific advancement of the facts that are presented to us, We now have a much stronger scientific basis that speaks to the holistic approach, and the entire ecosystem is tied together. What we also have today is a much larger momentum across the society and the economy towards climate and nature-friendly innovation and private investment. And a growing number of private businesses and financial sector is realizing, and the writing is on the wall, because if they don't take correct action now and change their behavior, change their products, change their supply chains, they will become the Kodaks of the future. So therefore, it would be critical to take this momentum through putting in place enabling environments and public policy. And again, this is where organizations such as TERI bring about that practical and pragmatic change processes. In the last few years, the increasing climate movements around the globe demanding climate justice, and especially the youth. And I'm very cognizant about that. And we in the Climate Change Secretariat actually support the youth constituency. There are several youth constituency who are very much closely linked to our process. And I have seen in the last four or 5 years that constituency and their voice has really become very vocal, and they make a significant impact. And the world leaders do listen to them. But there is a lot more that needs to be done. And as I always say, this is my personal reflection, is that we have not inherited the environment from a previous generation, especially in my case, for instance. In fact, we should have the responsibility that we have borrowed the environment from the future generations. So therefore, we have a huge moral, ethical responsibility to protect that and hand over to the next generation in a responsible manner. And therefore, we have seen in both developed and developing countries an increased importance towards mainstreaming the efforts of climate change, addressing climate change into climate policies. In other words, there is an increasing trend seen in newly elected governments to shift their ministries from working in silos to streamline the collaboration across topics and merge their work to respond to the current needs. In some countries, I won't name the specific countries, I have seen ministries having a ministry, for example, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which has incorporated a department on international climate negotiations, or a Ministry of Climate Change and Finance together. So we are seeing changes, and also elections in many of the countries around the world are being won and lost in the battleground on climate change. And that is a promising, and it's an increasing trend, and we are supporting all of that. Increasingly, through the years, we register constant growth in the participation and attendance of the civil society in our COPs and in our UNFCCC process. Glasgow, we had 40,000 participants, and in fact, interestingly and counterintuitively in a way, because of the pandemic and the possibility of virtual participation, those numbers in thousands have gone into millions now, because there is nothing stopping anyone anywhere in the world to join those conversations, to convey their voices to these platforms. So I hope the TERI event next year would also provide that opportunity to participants from around the world to join in a virtual manner. And in our process, we refer to something as non-party stakeholder engagement, and the delegations are more and more involved in our process. Their voices are being taken into consideration. Admittedly, it's a party-driven process. The parties are very obsessive about their negotiations and the decisions they make, but we are seeing growing importance of those non-party stakeholders in our process. And zooming into, again, to our process, allow me to give you a brief overview of where we can move forward in this pivotal year. COP26 outcome, adoption of the Glasgow Climate Pact. That was held under the motto of keeping 1.5 degrees alive, and resulted in many positive outcomes. Examples are the completion of the Paris Rulebook, which took almost 5 years to finalize, especially to do with the carbon markets and the transparency framework. The call for action across all areas through the Glasgow Climate Pact achieved by parties under the strong leadership of UK presidency, where Indian government was very much present and took a very important role in those final decisions in Glasgow. So with the completion, and couple of other things, adaptation was also highly emphasized in terms of increasing the amount of funding that is allocated to adaptation, the launching of the global goal on adaptation, and to call an important call for the developed countries to fulfill their promise of the $100 billion that they had made and still remains to be not filled so far. So there are some actions that still need to be undertaken, and we are at it as we speak. So with the completion of the rule book in Glasgow, the focus of the international climate change regime has moved to fully on implementation. So therefore, COP27 this year must be, and we are working towards a COP of implementation. And it should be the first COP where nations must show that they will begin through legislation, through policies and programs throughout all jurisdictions and sectors to put the Paris Agreement to work in their home countries. And again, I see Terry as a very important stakeholder in this exercise. COP27 will also be the COP where all segments of the society will be supported to drive more climate action under the UN climate change idea of inclusive multilateralism. Beyond the framework of formal negotiations, the work of our high-level champions, there are 2 high-level champions who are working day and night to engage and to bring action from the non-party stakeholders, as well as wide diversity of climate action initiatives, platforms, and projects, which will be scaled up. And some of the ones that I've already mentioned when we met Dr. Dhawan in Delhi was the Race to Zero, Race to Resilience. So those platforms are gaining a lot of momentum. And our Secretariat is working through the Marrakesh Partnership on Global Climate Action to strengthen collaboration between governments and other stakeholders. And as I mentioned, and one other thing, we talk about multilateralism, and this is something which is dear to many of our work policies and structures. But multilateralism is not only bringing the governments and state parties together, it is inclusive multilateralism, where civil society, and especially the youth, have a large and prominent role in the ongoing debate. And that is the only way forward to address climate change and recover from the current conflicts and the crisis that we are all living through. And history has shown that the world succeeds together when the world works together. Nations are not accountable to United Nations, as Mr. Nitin Desai would know. They are accountable to each other, to their populations, to their citizens. In fact, global challenges from the last 2 years underline the importance of multilateral processes. The success of our collective efforts to address climate change and the overall success and health of multilateralism are clearly linked. So in conclusion, let me once again highlight that climate change is tied virtually to every major challenge humanity faces. And by addressing it, we can create a more resilient, sustainable, just, and equal, prosperous future for all people. And COP27 represents a major opportunity to make progress in that regard. And I very much look forward to working closely with Terry and making Terry's World Sustainable Development Summit as one of the milestones in our process, and very much also look forward to welcoming Terry and many of you in the audience at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and encourage you all to get involved as much as possible in addressing humanity's long-term threat, which is advancing, and there are huge opportunities to stop it and benefit from the actions of climate action that present to us. So thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure to share these views, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you, Dr. Dhawan.
Thank you, Mr. Sarmat, for highlighting the importance of taking practical and institutional approaches to integrating sustainable development and taking collective action towards it. We're also delighted to hear about the many steps taken by UNFCCC to make COP27 more inclusive and action-driven. Thank you. It is my pleasure to now call upon Dr. S. Siddharth, Additional Chief Secretary, Finance, Government of Bihar, to deliver the presidential address.
Thank you very much. Ladies Chairperson, Shri Nitin Desai ji, Terry's DG, Dr. Ruha Dhawan, Shri Wsds Sarma, other distinguished speakers on the panel. Thank you for giving me some time to share the experiences in Bihar. We are one of the first states in Bihar to come up with the green budget. We came up with the first green budget in the year 2021. And subsequently after that, we have been publishing our green budget. And we are the first state in the country to place the green budget in both the houses of the Assembly House, which means that it is examined by the members of the legislature and views are also obtained. We decided on this venture after the Honorable Chief Minister started the Jal Jeevan Haryali Abhiyan, wherein climate change was declared to be top on the priority. It's so important that not only we have a program, every month, the first Tuesday, we have discussions on and debates. All the government employees are supposed to debate on climate change and issues related to climate change. There is a topic which is floated around, and that is the level of involvement of the government. We started identifying the departments which relate to climate change, and we identified about 19 departments which contribute to the environment issues as per the sustainable development goals. So we identified 19 departments, which included construction departments, which includes the social welfare departments and other departments. Every budget scheme, every budget head was then broken down into its effect on climate change. So we identified each and every budget head. We tried to divide it into marginal budget heads, which have marginal effect on climate change: low, medium, high, very high, and fully dedicated. The marginal effect indicators included training, capacity building, certain information and communication programs. And the range ended with the fully dedicated programs, which included afforestation programs, tiger reserves, e-vehicle schemes, and other energy efficiency schemes. So we have divided the categories into areas which have 0 to 1% to 5% effect, 5 to 25% effect, 25% to 50% effect, 50 to 75, 75 to 90, and 100% effect. So basically, we divided all the budget heads. So we use the modified Rio marker methodology, and all the departmental officers were explained about the modified Rio marker methodology. So as on date, all the officers of the department are aware of this. And then using coefficient for estimation of green component of environmentally relevant schemes, we then prepare the budget. So we have a budget which now this is the budget which is of 2021, and this is the budget of 21-22. It is in vernacular Hindi language, so everybody can understand. All the departmental officers also can understand. So we publish it in Hindi, and we are planning now to translate it in English for to be appreciated by other state governments. The effect of this was that we also came up with the environment indicators. We have indicators in terms of land utilization indicators. We have indicators of forest indicators, groundwater indicators, water management indicators, air quality indicators, climate change indicators, disaster indicators, biodiversity indicators. So we have also recorded the indicators also. So with these indicators, we would be able to actually monitor the progress of these indicators on year basis. So every year we have these indicators which we monitor, and we will see how our budget actually affects these indicators. And the budget talks about how much positive component or positive effect it has on the environment, which includes a lot of schemes on, we have sanctioned a lot of schemes on water harvesting, regeneration of ponds, regeneration of wells, renewing the canal system. Afforestation is on the top of our priority. Forest cover, recovery of degraded forests. Then we also have looked at water harvesting structures on all schools and government buildings, solar panel installations on all government buildings. So we had a plan of about 24,000 crores to be invested under this particular component of Jal Jeevan Haryali. We have extended the program to 2025. It ended this year, but again we have extended to 2025. So this is one major initiative of the state government, wherein we have a green budget, we have documented indicators, we have provided for funds to improve the indicators, and that we would monitor it on year-on-year basis. So every person, every panchayat, every person in the panchayat, all panchayat raj representative, all government representatives, everybody is trained for this purpose to improve the indicators, to improve the Jal Jeevan Haryali scheme. What the Honorable Chief Minister says is that if only when Jal is there, Haryali is there. If Haryali and Jal are there, only then Jeevan is there. So that is what he says. That is why he has coined this name Jal Jeevan Haryali. Government of India also has come up with a new scheme subsequently, but we were the first state in the country to have the scheme ongoing. There are still some challenges, which I think many of the experts in this field would talk about. We are yet to actually come up with indicators which have a negative impact on the environment. That we have not documented. And we also are working on it, that how much of negative environment it has on environment. And then we would have a net effect on environment. How much is the net positive effect on environment? So you have a negative effect of environment on certain schemes. You have positive effect on environment on certain schemes. So we would like to come up with indicators of net effect on environment. We are still working on it. I don't know whether any expert group has worked on it as to how to come up with the net effect, but that is still on our cards. But we'll continue to present our green budget, continue to monitor our indicators, and everybody is playing on this. So that's how we carried out this work on. And we would obviously share with you our SOP. We'll share with all the participants and with Terry also our SOP, which is in English, as to how we carry out and how we make the marching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Siddharth. It is indeed heartening to see how Bihar has been proactive and successful in mainstreaming sustainable development into its annual budgetary process. This is indeed an important step towards the integration of sustainable development into decision-making at all levels. I now invite Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Senior Advisor and Scientist, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, to deliver the leadership address.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nitin Desai, Chairman Terry, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, DG Terry, Shally Kedia, all the distinguished panelists, and the constituent joining from different parts of the country. Very good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all the constituents. Let me compliment the organizer for choosing this theme of mainstreaming sustainable development, which is in fact has never been more important than now in view of threat that is caused by climate change. You know, the science and technology and innovation is a key driver for economic development and also for the human development. So as India moves towards a sustainable development pathway that will include social development, the economic development, environmental sustainability, all towards achieving an Atmanirbhar Bharat, the emphasis now will be given in this as part of the National Science and Technology Innovation Policy, which is getting finalized, on promoting traditional knowledge system, developing indigenous technologies, encouraging grassroots innovations, and the development to become sustainable. We need a new science and technology innovation to come and address these issues in a more holistic way. You know, it's very interesting that the role of science and technology in attaining or achieving the sustainable development. You know, it is the technology-driven industrial development that led to climate change. And it's going to be the science and technology-led coping strategy and clean technology that would help addressing the climate change. So it is also cause and also a solution for achieving better climate action and sustainable development. In fact, the new science and technology policy that is going to come up is actually focusing on creating an STI ecosystem that meets the challenges of SDG goals and also aligning those with the national priorities. Climate change, they in fact threat not just for the global community, but more so for India. The Working Group 1 and 2 report that were released this year, in fact, gave very starkest warning about the deepening climate emergencies. If the global community do not come together to address this, we are heading towards an irreversible process when the sustainable development becomes a very challenging issue. In that Working Group 2 report that came in March end presented climate change as part of a coupled system with three components getting interacted with each other: climate change, the ecosystem, and the human society. And therefore, the three are interconnected and cannot be seen as separate system. And interestingly, one impacts other in terms of their overall interactions. Now, the climate change is in fact going to be major disruptor for sustainable development. Already, Dr. Desai also mentioned that And this destruction will come in different way. For example, the temperature increase is going to be the first major disruptor for development. Both the change in the temperature, average temperature, but more importantly, the increase in extreme events and extreme temperatures. We witness today the heat waves are in fact increasing. In last couple of weeks, we are seeing that entire countries witnessing increasing heat wave. Now, these are going to have impact on, say, some developmental programs. For example, almost all in infrastructure development program, be it transport or the construction, are going to be impacted by high temperature. Therefore, to sustain them over time and in the time to come, they become more and more relevant. We see that the heat waves are in fact increasing not just in frequency, in terms of frequency, but also in terms of intensity and duration. There is a longer duration heat wave now than they were earlier. And this is a big challenge, and prediction of these heat wave is one area, but I think more importantly, it is the local administration that need to devise the methods and ways of managing and warning people and also addressing this thing. Now, future projection of temperature is another concern. As of now, we had change in temperature up to 1 degree centigrade. But in next 20 years, this is the report, report 1 says that in next 20 years, going to witness temperature up to 1.5 degree centigrade. And beyond that, it might become almost irreversible and we reach a tipping point. That so if again if the global community do not get work on these mitigation in a serious way, we are going to have very unsustainable development in future. The second important extreme rainfall that causes flood, but also because of the heat, you also have droughts. So you have droughts and flood both taking place together. And that creates the impact all of the development, water, agriculture, health, energy, everything getting impacted by these extremes. So we need very different kind of development pathway that addresses all these concerns. Now, India is facing an interesting dichotomy. A dichotomy that, India is in fact going for a very proactive climate action. The kind of renewable energy program we had, the kind of the adaptation program that we have put in, all put together in fact positioning India in a very proactive climate action country. Yet we are going to be severely impacted by the climate change because of our population density, because of our poverty, and many such issues. Now, this dichotomy is a big challenge, and then to sustain development is a kind of one that need a concern for us. Also, so therefore the big challenge for India will be how to sustain with the sustainable development action and how do we mainstream sustainable development in the situation threatened by climate change. So this is a big challenge, I think. Now let me talk about the challenges that posed by mitigation action. Now India announced, some big mitigation action as part of the COP26. And the most important one is that India would attain carbon neutrality by 2070. Now, this entails, so huge action on the mitigation side. India's mitigation strategy has been that it brings more energy efficiency, promote renewable and other clean energy, and chart a development pathway which is different from the Western world. Instead of capping the emission, we have chosen to avoid the emission. And so India's development pathway ensures economic and social development focused on improving human development without compromising sustainability. Now, this poses a big challenge when we are going to achieve carbon neutrality by 2070, because in that case, we need to upscale our renewable energy nearly 10 times the present value. We nearly had to address the use of coal and use of fuel in a big way. And that will make actually put a challenge on our development path, because to reach that development path, which the Western world has already reached, is going to be very taxing to the country. And therefore, that again is a major challenge from the point of view. I would end with saying that, in fact, we face two major paradoxes. And these paradoxes are like mitigation versus development. So we had to mitigate without compromising development. And the other paradox is that we need to have increased action on adaptation to achieve better pathways to development. So it is the mitigation versus development and the adaptation versus development are the two paradoxes that India is facing. We need to create a good balance between these two paradoxes and two different kinds of systems. I think the mainstreaming sustainable development is the way forward for humanity to exist and sustain, but there is a big challenge to achieve this. This would need a well thought strategy and ensure that the deliberation in the next year World Sustainable Summit is going to address these issues in a more holistic and a more organized way, and come up with a very viable solution. I thank you very much once again for inviting me for this important deliberation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for talking about how the Department of Science and Technology is integrating sustainable development in its policy processes and its various initiatives in aligning SDGs to the national priorities. Science, technology, and innovation will have a huge role in creating the coping strategy and in developing clean technologies to address climate change. Thank you. I now call upon Mr. Sunil Nair, Chief General Manager, Reserve Bank of India, to deliver the leadership address.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Nitin Desai, Chairman TERI, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, Dr. Shelly Kedia, Mr. Oais Sarmat, and all other distinguished speakers who spoke before me. A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whichever part of the globe you are participating in this event. It's indeed a privilege to be a part of this prestigious event, which is being just held ahead of the upcoming World Environment Day 2022. I'm glad to know that World Sustainable Development Summit is the annual flagship event of TERI, and that summit has completed 20 plus years in its journey of making sustainable development a globally shared goal. In my address today, I'll briefly discuss the following aspects: our vision for mainstreaming sustainable development and climate action at Reserve Bank of India, and specific examples where RBI has integrated sustainable development and climate action in its policy or program. A standard disclaimer that these are my personal views. So as regards a vision for mainstreaming sustainable development and climate action, as you're already aware, the RBI's core purpose is to foster monetary and financial stability conducive to sustainable economic growth and to ensure the development of an efficient and inclusive financial system. Our core purpose reflects the Reserve Bank's commitment to the nation, which among others is to support the balanced, equitable and sustainable economic development of the country. Let me elaborate a bit here. Sustainable development essentially refers to the process of maintenance of quality of environmental and social systems in the pursuit of economic development. The contribution of financial institutions, including banks, to sustainable development is paramount, considering the crucial role they play in financing the economic and developmental activities of the world. In this context, the urgency for banks to act as responsible corporate citizens in the society, especially in a developing country like ours, needs be hardly overemphasized, and their activities should reflect the concern of both human rights and environment. In the view of the growing worldwide momentum on sustainable development and the initiatives being taken on various fronts by different organizations, including all major banks worldwide, it has become essential that banks in India to scale up their engagement in this regard. Further, global warming and climate change are particularly important in the context of sustainable development, especially for developing countries, which need to be better equipped to handle such changes. In this context, I'm glad to share that the Reserve Bank has also been spreading awareness on the issue of green and sustainable finance through its various publications and communication channels. More recently, in publications, be it RBI Bulletin or be it the Financial Stability Report, the Reserve Bank has been emphasizing on the risk of climate change on financial assets and the need to focus on environmental friendly sustainable development. To accelerate its efforts in this regard, Reserve Bank joined the Network for Greening the Financial System as a member on April 23, 2021. The NGFS is a group of central banks and supervisors willing to share best practices and contribute to development of environment and climate risk management in the financial sector, while mobilizing mainstream finance to support the transition towards a sustainable economy. We expect to benefit from the membership of NGFS by learning from and contributing to the global efforts on green finance, which have assumed significance in the context of climate change. In a major effort at mainstreaming sustainable development and climate action in May 2021, the Reserve Bank set up a sustainable finance group within its Department of Regulation to lead the efforts on climate risk and sustainable finance. The Sustainable Finance Group would be instrumental in evolving a regulatory framework, including appropriate disclosures for banks and other regulated entities to propagate sustainable practices and mitigate climate-related risk in Indian context. The SFG is also coordinating with other national and international agencies on issues relating to climate change. To assess the progress of the regulated entities in managing climate risk and also to sensitize them to incorporate climate-related and environmental risk in their business strategies, as also in their governance and risk management frameworks, the Reserve Bank has prepared a consultative discussion paper, which should be out very shortly. In line with the international best practices, banks will be guided to adopt a forward-looking, comprehensive, and strategic approach to climate-related risk. The discussion paper would touch upon certain regulatory measures or initiatives that could be taken by RBI in the area of climate risk and sustainable finance. Based on the feedback received from the stakeholders, as also the work done by various international standard-setting bodies, be it Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, Financial Stability Board, etc., the Reserve Bank would come out with appropriate guidelines in this regard. During January 2022, the Reserve Bank carried out a survey to assess the status of climate risk and sustainable finance in leading scheduled commercial banks. The survey was intended to nudge banks in giving greater attention to climate risk and sustainable finance and scale up their engagement in these areas. The responses have given us good insights on the climate risk and sustainable finance and also highlighted the efforts that would be need to be taken in this regard. The feedback from the survey would help inform the regulatory and supervisory approach of Reserve Bank to climate risk and sustainable finance and also help fine-tune its capacity building and awareness measures in this regard. Now, coming to a specific example where RBI has integrated sustainable development and climate action in its policy program. On December 20, 2007, the Reserve Bank had issued instructions to banks to put in place an appropriate action plan towards making a meaningful contribution to sustainable development. Thereafter, Reserve Bank has been steadily incentivizing banks by asking them to lending to greener industries and projects. For example, renewable energy projects have been included under PSL, loans sanctioned to individuals for setting up off-grid solar plants and other off-grid renewable energy solutions for households. The limit has been further expanded to 15 crore and it has been, the areas included further have been solar power-based generators, biomass power-based generators, windmills, microhydel plants and non-conventional energy-based utilities, that is street lighting systems and remote village electrification. The inclusion of renewable energy in priority sector lending has given a fillip to the flow of bank credit, which has increased from 1333 crore as of March 27, 2020 to rupees 3726 crores as of March 25, 2022 to this segment of PSL. These figures relate to only smaller renewable energy projects which get covered under the PSL on account of 30 crore ceiling. If one includes bank lending in the large renewable energy projects, then the sizable growth in overall lending to this segment can be better appreciated. For example, SBI alone has sanctioned 30,000 crore for renewable energy as per its sustainability report for FY 2020-21. Liberalized external commercial borrowing norms of RBI also enable the Indian renewable energy companies and other firms to tap the ECB route for raising finance through green bonds and sustainable bonds. To summarize, in my view, the inclusion of renewable energy under PSL guideline is a good example where RBI has integrated sustainable development and climate in its policy. I would like to conclude by thanking Terry for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this event and my best wishes for the continued success of the World Sustainable Development Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nair, for highlighting various initiatives by the Reserve Bank of India in promoting sustainable finance, especially through its publications and communications. Banks indeed have a huge role in providing the much needed finance to deliver and achieve the sustainable development goals. We now move on to the next segment of the event. To mark the most important day in the annual environmental calendar, the communications team at TERI has put together a video series titled Green Shoots, where researchers talk of an incremental yet incisive change that can impact the environment positively. Can we please have the video?
See, first of all, there can't be just one change. There are going to be series of changes depending on the end use. One thing I would like to mention is about biofuels, the enhanced use of biofuels, because first of all, they are renewables. You can generate them. And second is that it can also lead to local economy development. Biofuels, it's not something new. We are talking about this for decades together. And we have also shown it used before the fossil fuels were discovered. All the palaces in India, they were lit by jatropha oil. Where we have, or rather on the way we have lost use of these because of the ease and economic viability of fossil fuels. What we need to do now is that biofuels can be generated at local level and utilized at local level, and the way you use it will vary depending on the application.
I think one of the biggest changes which we should be looking at is actually using whatever we are consuming, whether it is in the form of energy, materials, anything, in a most efficient manner. So to me, resource efficiency, energy efficiency, I come from that background. So that's something which I believe should be the first thing which everybody should practice. And that ultimately is going to help reduce your environmental footprint in all possible ways.
I think the one major policy change that we look forward to, how to gain the net zero emissions. And that is one of the biggest gain that the environment would have in our lifetime, because it would benefit biodiversity, it would benefit production forestry, and it would also benefit environment in totality.
Major challenge in biofuel is that it should be economically viable. Economic viability is proving to be a challenge. And that is largely because we are looking at the fuel separately. We don't have that much of land available, but we are also looking at algae. In aquatic system, carbon dioxide is sequenced and biomass is produced. It is faster than any of the terrestrial systems. And we have algal strains which have as much as 45% on dry weight basis as lipid. Not just lipids, because it is also source of nutraceuticals. It's a good in protein, it is rich in protein and therefore can be used as cattle feed. And especially if you go for marine strain cultivation, you are using the seawater, so there is no further pressure on land, there is no pressure in terms of water. So it becomes something which is win-win.
I think the biggest challenge here is within ourselves. How do we really change ourselves in our day-to-day routine? How do we make our children ensure that they don't keep their ACs at 19 degree or 20 degree centigrade and they see that yes, we are putting it at 24 degree centigrade? How do we ensure that whatever we are eating, we don't take so much what we can't eat? Basically, you need to ensure that yes, we consume whatever we need. I think
The
that
challenge here is to understand the diverse aspects of net zero, and that is not only carbon sequestration, but understanding and communicating whole range of co-benefits to the environment, to the local communities, and also addressing the needs of local communities as well as societies at large.
The main problem with biofuels is its economic viability. So what we need to do is not look at biofuel in isolation. Rather, it should become one of the byproducts, because it can be used for pyrolysis, it can be used for animal feed, you can extract nutraceuticals from this. So there are so many uses. So the concept is biofuels and biorefinery. You look into other platform chemicals, what will emerge from this alga. So you're killing two birds with one stone. One is you're making this entire process economically viable, and the other is you're not generating any waste, which otherwise can become another problem at a later date.
I think that's the behavioral change we really need. Switch off the lights when you're moving out of your room. Switch on the AC only when you need. These are the small things. When you're going to a nearby place, to a market, why do you need to take your two-wheeler or a four-wheeler? Why can't we walk for 10 or 15 minutes? So these are some of the small things which we should be doing in our day-to-day life. And how do we make this as a habit in our daily routine? That is something which is important, and this is the biggest challenge. We have to, as seniors, as parents, as teachers, this is what we should be teaching to our children and our fellow colleagues.
Forestry sector is one of the biggest sector having opportunity to address net zero. And forestry sector, when I say that, it means not only forests, natural forests, but also the agroforestry. And through the efforts of our own work at TERI, we are in a position to convince number of states in India to have carbon neutrality policy where we can actually benefit the local communities, you benefit environment, and you sequester carbon in an unprecedented way.
We now move on to the final segment, the MOU signing between TERI and Diamond Tombs on the series of popular books on water conservation. I now invite Dr. Tayal to take over the proceedings.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MOU signing ceremony between the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, and Diamond Green. We have with us Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General, TERI, Mr. Manish Verma, Director, Diamond Tunes, Dr. S.K. Sarkar, Senior Director, TERI, and various sectoral experts who have joined us over here to grace this occasion. I welcome you all to the ceremony here with us. To begin with, I will request Dr. S.K. Sarkar to kindly deliver the comments.
Good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, let me welcome Manish ji and his delegation members for coming to TERI on this important event. And I also welcome our Director General for being present in spite of busy schedule on this occasion. In fact, this opportunity TERI in the water division has been looking for many years. Initially, we resorted to digital campaign on the water resources, but now I thought that we should also reach to the youth, to the other stakeholders who are really the future citizens of the country. Because water, as you know, that water is very essential for life. And as per the estimate of the Niti Aayog, that by 2030, our water demand will be almost double than the water supply, because water supply is finite. So if it is double in all demand, in all the sectors like industrial sector, agricultural sector, domestic sector, from where the water will come? Because our rain is almost only 4 months in a year. So we need to do something, and the best way is to water conserve. This water conservation is, earlier it was thought, in fact currently also it is thought that it is the work of the government. But government can't do it because government is, government is not the entire stakeholders. So we require sensitization, incentives on the part of the various stakeholders to agree on the water conservation. So herein lies the importance of this kind of initiative of Diamond Tunes and TERI for working together. And I am really grateful that in the water division, we will be working very hard to see that this initiative, which we have been longing for a long time, works through. So with these few words, I thank all of you for coming to the occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar. You very rightly pointed out that with the increase in demand, this is going to be the right approach to build the sensitivity among our children. Now I will request Mr. Manish Verma, Director, Diamond Tunes, to please address the occasion.
Good afternoon from Diamond Tunes. We are extremely elated to be here on the annual of World's Environment Day. TERI has been a torchbearer of the change required today for environment. More than ever, we need to lead behavioral change for inclusive and sustainable society moving forward. We have to increase our share of voice to protect the One Earth for issues on environment, biodiversity and climate change. Water is an important part. We all as stakeholders here, and we have inherited the planet. Today, we are very, very excited and happy to enter an MOU wherein we would be able to use the unique platform of Talking Comics with our universe of characters to perpetuate the values of TERI in simple, unique, and interactive manner to the custodians of the environment in multiple Indian languages, which we plan to do. The power of storytelling for ages has been the only way to make a society inclusive of change. We would try and make it universal for it to appeal to the kids, teenagers, and adults across the cross sections of various mediums we have today and platforms to meet the sustainable goals of development and environment. We promise to try and make our stakeholders responsible and inclusive. Thanks to DG Dr. Vibha Dhawan, our Dr. Sarkar, the entire the TERI team and our team. Let our superheroes go out, weave their magic and meet the global challenges of environment head on. I think we wish this endeavor the best and we create new content to reach out to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manish. You very rightly pointed out that teaching through storytelling is going to be the effective way, is the only effective way to teach the kids, and that's how the changes in our pedagogy is required. And certainly, as you mentioned about the popular characters, the legendary comic characters, which are there, Chacha Chaudhary, then Billu, Pinky. From the ages we all have been reading about these reading comics from these characters. So thanks a lot. Now I will request Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, to please guide us through her words.
Thank you, Suresh. And it's definite. I'd like to welcome Manish and other colleagues from Diamond Group of Publications. I'll also like to acknowledge presence of our chairman, Mr. Nitin Desai, who is the torchbearer for TERI, whatever we do here. So we constantly get his guidance. Dr. Sarkar has long experience with water, various initiatives of TERI, and I should say when he was in government, he also guided the policies and very rightly mentioned that water is a resource that we are really falling short of. And unfortunately, there is very little sensitization. It's among all sectors because first is that the water pricing is distorted. Even today in Delhi, it's almost free water, and anything free, basically it's not that you don't value that resource. It's also that we have common aquifer, and therefore somewhere it is, if I say, what do I get? Because ultimately we share that resource. We also talk about almost 80% of the water being used in agriculture. And there are possibilities that we can use the recycled water, but we are ignoring it. In fact, when you go to the hills and you talk to them, why not to have recycling and so on? And the ultimate question is, how much is the price? And the moment you say it will be almost 1 rupee a liter, the answer is the collection cost from the nearby spring and bringing it to the village is less than a rupee. So why should I spend even that 1 rupee to recycle water? Amongst children, because see, gone are the days, and especially in cities, because you have easy availability of water in the tap. And therefore, they also don't value. It is, we all use RO water. The builders are insensitive because in most cases, the builders' flats, when they put provision for RO plant, and somewhere the pipe which simply goes to the drain. So there is no concept how much water is being wasted, whether you use RO water for what purpose. So we are ignoring all these. You have very rightly touched upon this point that children and we in various forums we are saying that we are not custodians of natural resources. We have borrowed it from the next generation. So next generation should also, in a way, be party to our actions today. Right. And of course, I also have 2 grandchildren, and what their ma'am had said, that becomes the Lakshman Rekha. Yes. That you have to follow what has been taught to them in the schools, especially primary schools. Once they pass that stage, then they start making their own decisions.
Because the teacher ne kaha hai.
So ma'am ne aisa kaha hai, so it is like, since I corrected one day, I'm just sharing one example. So the root system of diacot versus monocots is different. So the ma'am had drawn it wrong. So I corrected it. But then that question became wrong because on the basis of root, I said it's a monocot and teacher had said, no, it's a diacot. So he tried to explain to her, and the ultimate teaching to me was, whatever is in my copy, you have to teach that way. But what is also happening, and one thing I would like to, I don't know how we can correct it, and that is this generation is becoming more hooked to computers, more so because of the COVID. So it is that all the time they are playing games on the computer or phone and so on. So the teaching habit somewhere is going away. So we have to bring that back to the children, and therefore you have a huge responsibility of making your comics very attractive so that they feel there is something in it. And the other is that somewhere I'll say maybe little affordable as well.
Sure.
So it is like, I looked at it, 100 rupees. I don't know how open they will be to buy it, or maybe you give them something to play in this, something where they use their brains just more than the reading alone.
Right.
So, but I'm very happy that we are joining hands today. Terry, we have a division which Loveleen is heading, which is basically on education, youth education side. And we have brought out large number of books in the past for the children.
I know.
And they're very good books, they're, full of knowledge, I'll put it that way. But Terry, as an organization, our outreach is limited. So it would be great that we are planning to work together, bringing, I should say, knowledge-based books for the children.
Absolutely.
So our job will be to put knowledge part of it, and with your partnership will make it far more attractive for the children. And more so, like, bring out in different languages so that it spreads to all parts of the country. Because knowledge generated, you can't simply keep it to the institute, you must take it out to every nook and corner of the country. And I'll say maybe in years to come internationally.
Yes, ma'am.
Because
so this is a universal topic, ma'am, and we've been talking before today and generated ideas. We have a range of characters.
Sure.
So Chai Chaudhary Billu Pinky is one set which is very universal. It appeals to the adults, and we have another character known as Little Chanakya. So we thought we can create content for pre-teens. We have another character which is Tinga Dojo, which is a green dog. It's a dog from the outer world, and it's from a green world. So we can create content for toddlers, smaller kids, right? And our distribution reaches are also different. So comics goes to entirely different world. And like Tinga Dojo product is more experiential. So we have a experiential zone where we get 10,000 parents a month. So we plan to do is that we create content and it would be distributed as return gifts. So parents can give those books as return gift to the birthdays people get.
Yes.
So it's a different approach, right? So, and when you're talking about today, content has to actually travel from print to, we call it something like e-comics, and we also get digital animated products. We've also experimented with gaming. So some of the commercial work we were doing, like Swachh Bharat. So we have created a video game, right? Now, issues is that you can create a lot of content, but point is, how do you monetize and how do you distribute so that it is sustainable?
Sure.
So that we have to work out.
Right.
But it is a good idea to create something like we were talking to Loveleen ma'am on doing something with Green Olympiad. So how can we create a repository of art? These are the things which are which are happening. So we have to draw everything from what is happening in the society, so that agar uska use hum karenge, so it becomes more contemporary and relevant.
Right. So thank you. Yes, Manish. Certainly, these things are going to be very encouraging, and together we will have to incorporate more and more creativity, and new tools will have to be brought in. And certainly the guidance from Dr. Dhawan, Dr. Sarkar, and our chairman and so it will be there to guide us in taking it forward.
Absolutely.
Now I will request Dr. Dhawan and Mr. Manish to please sign the memorandum of understanding between TERI and the Diamond Tunes.
correction कर दीजिए.
Right.
Correction कर.
We will do that.
Okay. Look forward to working.
Can you please show the corporate review from the front page? Front page. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Manish, for signing the MOU documents and formalizing the collaboration between TERI and Diamond Tunes. Dr. Dhawan, you rightly pointed out that children are the future of our country and also the opinion influencer in our homes. So building sensitivity among kids on water conservation can play a significant role in changing our thoughts, our attitude, as well as our behavior towards water. It's a nature's gift to humanity, which is being wasted by our reckless approach towards water. As highlighted by Dr. Sarkar, Manish, this MOU between TERI and Diamond Tunes provides an opportunity to share our experience from respective fields and develop educational material on water. There will be 3 dimensions, ma'am, of incorporating water into the into the comics of legendary characters like Chacha Chaudhary and Billu and Pinky. So first is the develop a separate set of comics focused specifically on various aspects related to water. Secondly, build one story within the regular storyline comics of Chacha Chaudhary and Little Chanakya. And thirdly, it will be like bringing the aspects of water conservation within the regular storyline of these comic books, because developing one comics or one set of comics may not be enough. So we have to regularly be in touch and keep children in touch with water sensitivity. So that's how the overall plan is. And simultaneous to development of comic books, an important aspect of this MOU will be to build capacity and disseminate the message through different modes like organizing school level seminars, quizzes, etc., which is being done by Environment Education and Awareness Division of TERI for past many decades now. We hope that through this initiative, we will also be able to connect the comic characters with various other dimensions of sustainable development goals like renewable energy, the waste management, and different other aspects can also be brought within the overall ambit. With this, I wish to thank you all for making this event memorable through your gracious presence. Thank you. Back to you.
On behalf of TERI, we thank you all for joining us today. We thank all distinguished speakers for an insightful and engaging discussion. We request you all to block your calendars for the next WSDS in 2023. The dates are 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of February. And we look forward to having you all amidst us here in Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.